in conditions that isolated us completely from civilization. We got so degenerate, so isolated, living from this mud.
And you could sympathise with how a rabbit must feel, because we were hunted by mankind, just the same as a rabbit.
You knew your lives were in one another's hands, and it united you very closely, and you didn't let anything interfere with that.
I mean, I think the film, you can make sense of what the personal experience was. I mean, sometimes you can't make sense of why this general chose to do that when it was clearly the most stupid bloody thing in the world to do. You know that stuff is hard to make sense of sometimes, the decisions of command. But as the soldiers in the film say, we didn't know anything apart from what we could see. Because that was, the British Army would not tell their soldiers anything, because if they got captured, they didn't want them to know anything, and they were interrogated, they didn't want them to know anything. So these guys literally, the First World War on the Western Front, miles and miles long, millions of men, and each soldier, their First World War experience was just what they saw in front of them. And that's why, these soldiers who are in our film, 120 of them, they don't talk about the politics of the war, they don't discuss what the generals were thinking, because they didn't know. I mean, that's a job of historians. Historians can certainly go through all the archives, which these guys had no access to, and actually piece together the command story version of the war, the political version of the war. This film is very much what the soldiers experienced, and they experienced life in a tiny little bubble. But what was interesting with 120 different soldiers is it was all their experience was pretty common. That right, no matter where they were, no matter what year they were in, they had a very shared experience. So it's like the film is like 120 voices telling a common story, a very human story. So there's multiple different ways to approach telling the First World War, and this film does one aspect of it. It's certainly not a definitive First World War film by any stretch. It just focuses on British soldiers at the Western Front. That's what this film is. What I was determined to do, I mean, it's important to have a balanced view of the war, and I don't think it's at all honest to sanitise the war. And I think it's very irresponsible to actually make a film covering the experience of being in the trenches in the First World War and not show the result of what happens if bullets hit you or hit your friend and shells. I mean, you have to, and to do anything else would be totally irresponsible, because you're sanitising it, you're hiding, you're sort of like you're censoring the true effects of war. And I think that young people, whether they're 14, 15, they need to see that. I mean, if the shots of the bodies in this film are shocking, then I think we've achieved something. Let's just give them a sense of what the real war is like. But also, the other thing that's often missing in accounts of the First World War is the humour. I mean, it was for human beings resort to humour when they're under enormous emotional stress. I mean, obviously, not all the time. Some people, fall apart. Some people can't handle it. I mean, this is not across the board by any stretch, but generally, humour is what you draw on when you have nothing else left, and that's your last line of defence in your in your brain as a protective thing. You start to joke about things, black comedy, dark jokes. Like the German who's dead on there, and they stuck a pipe in his mouth, and they told him to get up. That's horrible. But I can understand that's seeing that body would be awful. So they made a joke about it. They didn't go, oh my God, it's terrible, it shocked me, it's traumatized me. Which it probably could do, but the way they got through that is to stick a pipe in the German's mouth and say, come on, get up. So they turned it black comedy, and that's a defense mechanism. And so there's nothing funny about the First World War, but I wanted to make sure that people understood that the soldiers had humour, and they had to have humour. Yeah, well, we took the footage and we obviously added sound effects to it, with a very, very detailed sound effects. So, we took the approach that we wanted people to think that there was a microphone recording it. So we look at the shot, and anything that would make a sound, we would have it there. So it was this detailed, realistic soundtrack, which you really do feel like it's being recorded. But of course, the people talking is a key part of that, and it's silent movies. So yes, all you've got is lips moving. But fortunately, there's people in the world who read lips. They're forensic lip readers. They often do it with the police, because there's security camera footage of a crime that they see. They want them to read the lips of the people in there so they know what they were saying. And they're actually incredibly bloody skilled at it. So I mean, I don't know how they do it. So we sent the footage out. Anything where we had people clearly talking, we would send it out to to a couple of these forensic lip readers, and they would sort of come back and say, "Oh yeah, this person's saying this person's saying that." I was a bit shocked because a lot of that was this person saying, "Hi, mum." I mean, which is not what I really want. I didn't really want too many "hi, mums." It wasn't the most profound dialogue in the world, but that's what they. And you know they're saying it because we got actors in to do the lines, and you know it's actually true because you put it in with the voices and the lips match, and you say, "Oh yeah, well they are saying they're saying hi, mum." So but obviously it's not all hi, mum. We also lip read other more serious things as well. But we're doing the best thing we can is to actually lip read them. So we're not making something up. We're not saying, "Oh, we'll just have this guy saying that and this guy saying that." We're actually trying to figure out in a very detective-like way what they actually said, and putting that. And having an actor do that on their behalf.
Everything was friendly. There was a terrific lot of kindness in a way to each person.
When the war was not very active, it was really rather fun to be in the front line. It was not very dangerous, a sort of out-of-door camping holiday with the boys, with a slight spice of danger to make it interesting.